We made a video on this last night, but the follow it up, Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, Collin Sexton, and John Collins. And the Utah Jazz have been one of the worst teams in the league. They're fully committed to the Cooper Flag sweepstakes tank at this rate, which people around the league are wondering if they're finally going to be selling off some of those veterans. Obviously, due to CBA rules, Lauri Markkanen cannot be traded until this offseason, the earliest, due to his contract extension. Now, Walker Kessler, Jordan Clarkson, John Collins, and Collin Sexton are all people that are allegedly being gauged by opposing teams. Kessler's availability in Utah have come away with the sense that they'll take at least 2 first-round picks to prime from the Jazz, which is a high asking price, even if Will Hardy allegedly doesn't like Walker Kessler. Keontae George is starting full-time with Sexton and Clarkson available as potential backcourt depth. Collin Sexton has been on a tear since returning to the starting lineup. 20 points, 56% from the field, 40% from 3, 10 rebounds, and 1.5 steals in 10 games. And all 4 players have contracts that run through the 2026 season. And if Collins exercises his $56.58 million player option for next season, I just think when you look at this, like, Walker Kessler, contending team. John Collins, so many teams would love a John Collins, and John Collins is like top 5 in 6 Man of the Year race right now, if you guys weren't paying attention. And it's actually rather remarkable. I really think Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson is for any team that really needs some scoring off the bench and has the roster flexibility to do a deal like that. I just think it becomes rather difficult when you do try to do a deal like this because of the restrictions that will be placed on any contending team due to it being, high teen salaries, which typically don't bode well for guards, just because there's such a plethora of guards in the league that there's just easier contracts to move, and it's not as easy of an argument to make when saying like, oh, this guy's super valuable when he's a guard, because like there's a bunch of guys who are 6'1" to 6'4" in the league in free agency that can do the same thing as others. So those skill sets aren't as inherent as someone who's like 6'6" and above who can do certain skills. So I think that's one thing that people do need to understand when it comes to players is like, okay, like, yeah, like some guys are valuables, but some aren't because of like their position and what they bring to the table. Yo, what's going on, guys? And today we're talking about the Utah Jazz and trade rumors. Obviously, since the rebuild has begun, Jordan Clarkson, and since they acquired Collin Sexton, have been in rumors perpetually due to the fact that they're players that, they have inefficient contracts and they're kind of really good microwave off the bench playmakers who can table set a little bit, but also primarily be scorers. I guess Jordan Clarkson's not as much as a passer as Collin Sexton is. Jordan Clarkson's more of a pure scorer. Either way, Mark Stein of the Stein Line, reputable reporter, former of the New York Times and ESPN, now, doing the Substack thing. Dude, the amount of money that like you can make off Substack, like how he does, is actually ridiculous. I digress. The report right here that we're seeing is that the league-wide presumption is the Jazz nonetheless persist that John Collins, like Jordan Clarkson and Collin Sexton, are all trade candidates. And right now, John Collins is like actually top 5. If the season were to end, he would be a top 5 finalist for 6 Man of the Year. He's like hyper efficient this year. He's a switch big. He's a more natural power forward. Can play small ball 5. And people don't realize I'm a big John Collins fan. He literally has every physical tool and fundamental tool like to be a really good player, and he's flashed it. So right now, the way he's playing, I just feel like John Collins is over here like playing with a lot of confidence and playing some of his best ball of his career off the bench, while you have, I think, people like Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson, who, if a team needs a microwave or a guy who can come in and run the second unit, I know a lot of people are thinking, oh, Cam Thomas. Yeah, that's definitely anything. But both Jordan Clarkson and Collin Sexton are on cheap deals, and we know D'Angelo Russell is a guy that the Lakers are trying to get rid of. Our assumption is either probably a three-way trade or just straight up trade D'Angelo Russell, either packaged with like Jalen Hood-Schifino or another young guy, or just packaged with a pick to the Jazz, or three-way trade per se, D'Lo to the Nets. Nets send something to the Jazz, and the Jazz send either Clarkson or Sexton to the Lakers. Now, the only other, I feel for both Clarkson and Sexton, the other teams that could be interested, I mean, money-wise, unless like Randall's on the move, it'd be hard for the Timberwolves to do it. Plus, I mean, the Timberwolves be a team that'd be interested in John Collins, to be honest. If you put it, John Collins in the Timberwolves, that's actually one that makes sense if there was interest by the T-Wolves. I think the other like contracts that could be movable, because you're trying to think about what contracts are movable and what teams want guards. Like Sexton and Clarkson aren't going to go to either of, you know, the Wizards or the Hornets, because both of the teams, I mean, if they did, it would be in a 3-team trade where they would just be buying those guys out. Now, outside of that, I can't really think of teams that are like that desperate for a backup point guard. I mean, you could always say that, I mean, the contenders, if the Clippers or the Mavericks were trying to get like some help off the bench a little bit more than they do, but then, like, you know, it'd have to be like Maxi Kleber and somebody else put together, so it becomes a little bit difficult for a team like the Mavs. Same thing for the Clippers, like what contracts, because of the salaries. So that's one thing to think of. So Collin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson are two guys that, like, I think would go to teams that need scoring, like especially teams that are good defensively but are struggling offensively. The one that comes to mind is the Bucks. I think the Bucks would love to somehow churn Chris Middleton in, or really, yeah, I guess Chris Middleton's contract would be the best one, but you know, to maybe get a package of Clarkson or Sexton and Collins. I think it would have to be Clarkson and Collins. Either way, I think that's a team that would really like that. I think the Atlanta Hawks, if they really felt like, if they won the NBA Cup and they felt like they could go all in on this season and they wanted to flip Clint Capella and another contract, try to take on some, get some extra guard help, I wouldn't be surprised if they called up to get Collin Sexton or something. I just think the Atlanta Hawks is less likely for them. Outside of that, it's hard for me to envision, a contending team to come calling. Again, the Chicago Bulls, if they could convince them to take Zach LaVine or Vooch for one of those guys. One guy, like, again, they don't need another guard, is the Cavaliers. So the Cavaliers wouldn't be one. I've said it, the Dallas Mavericks, but I think John Collins is more of a fit up for them than Mr. Collin Sexton or Jordan Clarkson. I think, John Collins for Maxi Kleber, and I think they would have to package another salary in there, and then that's where it gets a little dicey for them. The Denver Nuggets, though, could have interest in flipping Zeke Nnaji in another contract for a Jordan Clarkson or a Collin Sexton to give him some scoring off the bench. I think they're ones that could be, hey, like, we'd be interested. John Collins, I mean, the Detroit Pistons have always had, I know it's a different regime and stuff like that, but you hear the Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren rumors. So that, I mean, John Collins, if they want to bring an adult into the front court room, they could figuratively do that. We know DeAnthony Milton is probably going to be traded, and it's like $12 million they are working with, and maybe that if they just traded DeAnthony Milton for, and then if they package maybe another player, they could get something else in there. So Collin Sexton or Mr. Jordan Clarkson could interest them, or even if they try to package like Kevon Looney and somebody else there, they could even go out and get John Collins. So those are all teams that I think are to look out for. As I said, Milwaukee, I think it's just hard for Milwaukee if they're going to have to either part ways with Bobby Portis, Brook Lopez, or Chris Middleton to get either of these guys. If the Grizzlies are going to be done with Marcus Smart and they want some more scoring, they could go after either of them, or if they are realizing that they made a mistake and they're going to lose Santi Aldama and they want to flip him for something, that could be a way they could get John Collins. Outside of that, I mean, I just find it really hard to see a team calling up. Like the Miami Heat seem committed with their roster. We've talked about the Bucks, the Timberwolves. It's just contract wise, and they're committed to, Dante DiVincenzo. Mike Conley isn't going to get traded there. I mean, the Pelicans, if they can do the Brandon Ingram trade, but that supposedly fell apart, and that's not going to happen. I think the Knicks, Mitchell Robinson for either Clarkson or Sexton could work, or even Mitchell Robinson. I don't know what contract they would package it with, but for John Collins could hypothetically be one that they'd be interested in. The Orlando Magic do need a backup point guard, and I think Cole Anthony with somebody else, another contract, and obviously probably drafts asset to sweeten it for either Sexton or Clarkson could be something that they can negotiate with. Obviously, the Sixers I think would be interested in any of those guys. Contract wise, it's a whole mess there. I don't even know what the Sixers would offer to entice them. The Suns are handicapped by the apron, and that's the same thing with a couple of these teams with the aprons there. The Blazers have no interest. The Kings might have interest in John Collins, but what, are you going to take Kevin Huerter with who's the trade sweetener? I don't know what you're sweetening that deal with. So that becomes hard for me to think about. And then outside of that, the Spurs, the Raptors, all these teams, they're not going to do this business. So maybe Jordan Clarkson or Collin Sexton gets sent somewhere for like Cam Thomas. In a dream scenario, you package or you send John Collins, you try to get Jabari Smith if you're the Jazz, but I really don't see a deal out there. I think John Collins might be your most valuable asset right now. Even that contract actually isn't that bad now. And then you look at all this, I think you could do something. I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Like, comment, subscribe. Bye.